South Koreans need to understand that North Korea is not the only country bringing communist influence to the Korean peninsula. China, as South Korea's largest trading partner, has infiltrated their country quietly. China's extensive influence on South Korea is a subject often overlooked in the West. A former South Korean intelligence officer once said in an interview that from economy, culture to higher education, there's no area in which South Korea has not been infiltrated by the CCP. First, China is South Korea's largest trade partner. 30% of its trade is with China. For years, China has leveraged bilateral trade to gain an upper hand in the relationship and secure greater access to South Korea. So I'm going to give you some specific examples. Now, nearly 700 friendship or sister city agreements have been signed between cities in China and South Korea. And this makes South Korea probably the country. I think it's the country with the most sister cities with China, 700. South Korea is also the country that has the most Confucius Institute in the world. At its peak, the country had 23 Confucius Institutes. However, South Korea only has a population of 51 million. The CCP funded language education programs aimed to promote Beijing's agenda. There's a retired Korean intelligence service case officer, Choi Soo-young, said that Seoul National University has a room dedicated to Xi Jinping's works. In contrast, the university does not have a memorial hall for South Korea's forefathers. Also, through state-sponsored public servant exchange programs, hundreds of Chinese officials have been sent to work and train in South Korea. Scores and a large number of South Korean officials or even retired officials have been on the paid tours or trips to China. So China has exerted its influence in foreign countries through this type of training programs. So for example, China has sent many of its up-and-coming high-ranking officials to be trained at Harvard University, the Kennedy School in the U.S. But it has turned the Kennedy School into its party school. I have a friend who went there, and he told me that the Kennedy School has become like a CCP party school. How do you think the CCP has infiltrated American media? Similarly, through these type of mutual training programs in which the Chinese invited Western journalists to travel in China while sending Chinese journalists to be trained in the West. And also, the Chinese embassy has founded many South Korean youth to spend a week in China. And before their departure, they're asked to read Xi Jinping's speeches and are told they're expected to become future leaders of bilateral relations. And then in 2023, the mayor of Gwangju, South Korea, attempted to build a memorial park to commemorate the composer of the PLA's army anthem and North Korean march songs with the aim to attract Chinese tourists. Okay, the author of the book, The Collapse of North Korea, Tara Oh, said in a media interview that compared to the threats from North Korea, the CCP's subversive activities in South Korea are less well known and less recognized, but are extensive and profound. And he called it the above-mentioned park project an aspect of China's culture warfare. Korean media outlets are influenced by the CCP through the media, similar like exchange programs or training programs. Dozens of South Korean media outlets reprint articles from the People's Daily, CCP's propaganda mouthpiece. In addition to trying to influence the Korean elites, the CCP also utilizes the more than 800,000 Korean Chinese, or what they called Joseonjok, living in South Korea, to carry out CCP's United Front work as part of its human wave tactics. By the way, 800,000 is about 1.5% of South Korea's total population of 51 million. Now, the Korean Chinese living in Korea help spread CCP's narratives on social media, and they infiltrate Korean communities at the grassroots levels. Okay, so because of their size, they can influence election results. In the US, you can't because the Chinese American community is still small. The Hispanic community can because of their size. But in South Korea, the Chinese can influence the election results. So, for example, in the 2022 election, Yoon Suk-yeol won by a slim margin of only 250,000 votes. Okay, 250,000 votes, and you have 800,000 Korean Chinese. So, and in some regional or mayoral elections, the candidates only won only by a narrow margin of only like tens of thousands of votes. So they can affect South Korean elections. However, the lack of awareness of the growing Chinese population in South Korea among South Korean politicians, including members of the National Assembly, is very concerning. Korean legislatures have even proposed to, quote, accept large numbers of Joseonjuk, or Korean Chinese immigrants. So they propose bills to accept a large number of Korean Chinese, and they want to allow foreign nationals to join political parties and be able to vote. I think the Chinese is the largest group of foreign nationals living in South Korea. And they also want to simplify the entry procedures and conditions for international students while issuing work visas to their parents. This is like allowing more Chinese to legally work in South Korea. I think this is the Korean version of open borders, but the difference between them and the Americans is that the Americans open the borders to anyone, but the South Koreans seem to open the borders just for the Chinese. And one Korean official said that if the current trend of granting citizenship and permanent residency to Korean Chinese, if this trend continues unchecked, in 30 years, South Korea will become a colony of China. So, and then one Chinese observer said that even Kim Jong-un of North Korea is wary of CCP's ambition. So they say it's alarming that the South Koreans are ignorant of that. With all that said, President Yoon has been trying to reverse years of appeasement towards Beijing. He has done a lot for South Korea, but somehow his effort has not been understood or appreciated by his countrymen. And I think it has to do with the strong opponents he has in the national parliament. And his opponents are highly critical of his policy.